I'm Billy S, welcome to the channel. This week I'm revealing the results of my community ranking poll where I got my voters to rank the Lies of P Overture bosses based on difficulty. We also did a quality ranking, which I'll touch upon briefly in each entry, but the main focus of today's video is to figure out the difficulty order of the DLC roster. The ranking system works as follows. I asked my voters to rank each boss on a scale between 1 to 10, with 1 representing easy and 10 representing extremely difficult. I figure out the total scores, find the average, and that represents our final rating. Interested in my personal thoughts? Check out my boss ranking from last week, where I ranked which were my personal favorites. Or consider watching my edited down playthrough of Overture so you can see all my reactions in real time. And guess what? I've even got base game Lies of P videos. There will be a playlist in the description. So without further ado, let's begin the Lies of P Overture boss difficulty ranking, community style. Let me know if you agree with my voters in the comments below. At number 8, we have the pre-metamorphic Green Hunter, who scored a total difficulty average of 4.33 out of 10. As for its quality score, it landed in 7th place with a 4.8 out of 10, which shows that this isn't a particularly difficult fight, nor is it a particularly memorable one for our voters. The Green Hunter is the past version of the green monster of the swamp from the base game, and with its smaller frame comes a faster moveset. You have the usual suspects like the underground dig attack or the forward red charge attack, which you should be able to avoid based on base game muscle memory, but the tendrils the Green Hunter uses in battle are now a lot more dangerous. They still hit you with decay, but some of his combos have little tentacle sweeps at the end, which was, in my opinion, one of the most annoying parts about the Green Monster's original Phase 2. The grab attack is your worst enemy here though, as now the boss can stab you from afar with its tendrils, pulling you in and siphoning your energy to heal itself, all while inflicting you with guaranteed decay. You have to learn to avoid the grab, but once you get past that little hurdle, the fight is a relative cakewalk. The Fire Grinder, or fire-based throwable consumables, work wonders against this enemy due to its carcass typing, and on top of that you don't even need to deplete the whole health bar in order to succeed here. Getting it down to around 10% health left will cause the pre-metamorphic Green Hunter to flee the arena, granting you victory. We can't change history at this point, but we can certainly give this monster a thrashing it won't soon forget. For difficulty, the Green Hunter got 52 votes for easiest boss of the DLC and no votes for hardest boss, while quality-wise it got 20 votes for worst boss of the DLC and no votes for best boss. But even then, compared to some of the fights in the base game, I think the Green Hunter is a solid middle-of-the-pack fight. As a rematch, it does exactly what I'd want from a younger variant of a monster we've already faced. And voter Saint Marianne agrees. Pre-Metamorphic Green Hunter is a superb rematch. He invokes the same spirit of the OG Green Monster's second phase, a familiar moveset that calls back to an earlier fight but is different enough to keep you on your toes. His grabs are punishing, but not overly hard to avoid, his status build-up is a threat, but not overwhelmingly so, and he's a wonderful surprise encounter for canny players who stumbled on his arena. And the fact that it turns the original fight into an on-site grudge match with a vengeful slimy monster is very funny to me. Saint Marianne, you are so real for that last point. The fact that us wailing on this baby of a creature inadvertently explains why the Green Hunter is so pissed when it sees us in present day is an extra layer I really appreciate. It's the same thing they did in Dark Souls 2, with the last giant actually being the giant lord you fight at the end of the game, and how you battle them out of order so you don't understand why the last giant is so angry to begin with, only realizing the context after. Everything else I also agree with. The grab is easy to dodge once you learn the tell, and everything else it can throw at you you're already familiar with from the original fight. Perhaps it would have been more fun had the boss had even more tricky new moves to deal with, but then it's designed to be a cute optional encounter, more in line with a very tough mini-boss, so I understand why the developers went this route here. At number 7, we have the Tyrannical Predator, who scored a total difficulty average of 5.23 out of 10, while quality-wise it lands in last place with a 3.94 out of 10. Similar to the Green Hunter, the Tyrannical Predator is outclassed by the rest of the boss roster, but unlike the Green Hunter, the Predator has more glaring flaws in its boss fight to get those haters riled up, and given it got 47 votes for Worst Boss and 0 votes for Best Boss, you can bet those haters were feeling their oats. What's interesting is that normally the most hated boss of a given Souls or Souls-like game is often a harder fight that has bullshit mechanics, but the Tyrannical Predator is a fairly easy fight that completely bucks this trend. Even without looking at my voters though, I can tell you why this boss was so disliked. It's the camera. While the Croc's moveset isn't particularly complex, featuring a lot of bites and jaw slams, the issue comes from how its attacks push Carlo back, often forcing us into the corner of the arena, and from there, the camera just decides it's time to give up. The irony being that Lies of P has shown its camera can work against massive bosses like the Anguished Guardian of the Ruins later on, but here, the arena of the Predator is just too confined for its moveset, leading to camera clipping and frustration. Now, I recognize this was the point, being stuck in a small space with a giant rampaging mutated monster is part of the boss design, but the intent doesn't always mean that the boss succeeds with its concept, and the moveset is just so reminiscent of good old Golden Hippo from Shadow of the Erdtree, and I don't need to explain why that might give certain players a tad bit of PTSD. Even so, I think the Tyrannical Predator is still better than a large handful of the base roster, but when I think about this DLC in the future, this will be the fight I forget. It doesn't help that it was so easy to rip this thing apart with a fully upgraded Puppet Ripper, which led to my mentality of sticking to the weapons I felt comfortable with from the base game. What I'm most curious about though is if the players found this boss easy due to the same factors as I did, or if there was something different at play. And the results are that 2 of my voters absolutely despised this boss. The internet is not beating the everything must be viewed in extremes allegations. First up, an anonymous voter. Tyrannical Predator was not only the worst boss in Overture, but the entire game as well. It feels like they took every aspect people hate in a Souls-like boss and combined them. Horrible camera that makes it impossible to see incoming attacks? Check. Aggressive attacks with basically no recovery time? You got it. Horrible hitboxes that would make Dark Souls 2 blush? Oh hell yeah! I fought in pre-patch on New Game Plus, and at one point I actually just turned the difficulty down a notch to get past him. I love myself some difficulty in my fights, it's why I've played all the Souls games multiple times, but there is a line between being hard and fair and hard and BS. The Tyrannical Predator is firmly in the latter camp. The only praise I can give is that the lore is cool if you do the Tracker's quest, and the design itself of a giant zombie crocodile will always be cool. But besides that, it acts as an unfortunate blemish on an otherwise great DLC. Let's start with what I agree with from this comment. The camera and the aggressive moveset are a big sticking point on whether you'll have a good time here. The former I already talked about, but the latter is also rough because it's very hard to make distance from the croc without it finding a way to catch back up to you. Still, I did personally find moments to heal in my playthrough, even if they were few and far between, which made for a tough initial challenge. I'm not against a boss forcing me to really analyze and figure out the safest points to heal though, and I don't think that's bad design. What I admittedly disagree with in this voter comment, and given this is a difficulty ranking I think it's fair to bring up, is that you're complaining about difficulty on a New Game Plus run. Now perhaps this is my YouTuber outlook coming through, but when I rank the difficulty of new games or DLCs, I like to have my first experience at the base level of difficulty New Game 0. My reasoning being that it's the difficulty the game was developed with in mind. I feel like complaining about difficulty when you're on a New Game Plus or New Game Plus Plus run as your first go is less on the developers and more on your choice to take on an entirely new set of enemies, bosses, mechanics, and areas without that safety net. Still, it is your opinion and I respect that even if I personally disagree, but it is admittedly funny that one of the few Tyrannical Predator comments I got is saying it's so hard the difficulty needed to be turned down. Meanwhile, the average ranking for this boss is 7th out of 8th. Next up, Luke P has something to get off his chest. I hate the tyrannical predator with a passion for a few reasons. To say one positive thing, it's a croc and I love reptiles. That's it, positives are over. This thing is annoying to fight with its head smacks, jaw snaps, and tail slaps, which could have been manageable had it not been for the tiny arena and horrid camera. But that aside, the boss isn't unbearably hard, it just lacks in fun. But even that isn't this thing's biggest sin. No, the biggest sin by far is that the first boss of an otherwise amazing DLC is this janky thing. It isn't fun, the camera sucks, it's literally just Golden Hippo but less interesting to fight, and this is the first impression we get of this DLC's boss roster. When I beat it, I was feeling a lot less optimistic about the DLC than I wanted to feel. I would say this comment by Luke P is more in line with my own feelings, albeit I didn't hate the boss myself. But I do think all of these critiques are correct. It's a fight we've seen before in other Souls games and doesn't do much to distinguish itself. The camera is a nightmare, but the most accurate sin is that it's just not the best introductory boss for the DLC. We have Markiona at the end of this zone, who is one of the best boss fights in the entire game, and yet the Tyrannical Predator ended up being our first combat challenge instead. That's where the dislike comes from, and I feel exactly the same. Had there been a way to make Markiona the main fight of the zoo, with the Tyrannical Predator being made an optional boss fight like the Green Hunter, perhaps one you'd have to do for the Trackers side quest that sends you back to the zoo, that could have been really cool. At number 6, we have the Two-Faced Overseer, who scored a total difficulty average of 5.7 out of 10, while on the quality scale he landed in 4th place overall with a 6.83 out of 10. The Two-Faced Overseer is such an interesting boss for me when it comes to Overture, purely because it rightfully lands in the middle of the pack. It's not a hard boss with a fairly slow, lumbering moveset that you can easily adapt to in comparison to something like Markiona or Arlecchino. His arena doesn't have the most interesting build-up, which leads to you just finding him chilling behind a large door, which could have benefited from a cutscene, and you have the Tracker as a voluntary helper who can distract the Overseer to make your life a lot easier. Having played a ton of Elden Ring Night Rain, I'm very used to how co-op can cause boss AIs to struggle, and this was definitely a thing here. His trump card, though, is when he converts into his red form, flipping his face around and pulling out somewhat faster and longer combos, which can leave the player panicked at face value. Even then, though, taking a step back, I don't think the Overseer's combos are more complicated than something like a Champion Victor or a Scrapped Watchman from the main game. While I beat him with Alidoro, and that certainly can be a way for players to judge the fight, you can also take him on solo via the battle memories, and I can guarantee that aside from his damage output, nothing else about his kit is terribly threatening. And yet the Overseer has such a cool design with the shifting faces gimmick, a really interesting weapon that looks ripped off of a Dead by Daylight killer, and that dynamic of summoning an ally to help in the fight that gives a real sense of palpable excitement. It helps they pick the best boy for this role. The Two-Faced Overseer being the most underrated fight of the DLC is reflected in the voters as well. 17 votes for easiest boss and a single vote for hardest boss aren't surprising, but despite being 4th in the quality ranking, he only scored 1 vote for best boss and 2 votes for worst boss. The question remains, what do my voters actually think? Well, the most interesting Overseer comment came from an anonymous user from Germany, so let's have a listen. The second boss I wanted to talk about is the Two-Faced Overseer, which was, for me, more like a mini-boss, considering his quick phase changes and the ability to call Alidoro who can't die. He's also able to perfect parry and heavy attack, so he's a good help, and Alidoro, it just felt more like a mini-boss. I really like the design of the two faces in a glass of liquid which breaks as you defeat him, and to his moveset, like I said, he goes quickly into his berserk form which forces you to either run away, or block and pray, it ends soon. The latter of which I felt like was very easy in his normal form because of his big weapon and slow moves. Though I thought the first option was good, as he then transforms himself a second time and I was like, I am pissed, but it's fair if you don't feel like a boss, but you now definitely are one. There I realized it was more than a gimmick fight to use the horn to call Alidoro, and I liked it. I liked that I struggled more than I first thought, still not as much as Arlecchino, which I slammed my head against for 3 hours straight before beating him, but it still felt strangely rewarding beating the Overseer and getting out of the psych clinic. I am sorry for any writing mistake, I don't write with the English keyboard often, but greetings from Germany. Before I get into the voter comment itself, I just want to say thank you for putting your thoughts out there. I know typing in a second language can be extremely difficult, but I do think I understood your point overall. I definitely agree with the comparison that the Overseer was almost mini-boss-like in comparison to the other 3 major refightable bosses of the DLC. Marchiona, the Anguished Guardian, and Arlecchino all had major cutscenes leading up to their fight, whereas the Overseer was just sort of there. His slow attacks make him easy to block, but his damage output and berserk movesets still keep you on your toes. What I like the most here though is the acknowledgement that summoning Alidoro doesn't make this a gimmick fight. You wouldn't call a fight a gimmick in a Souls game because you summoned help in the form of a co-op player after all. Alidoro feels like an integral part of this fight's design and makes that first experience something to remember. Again, it helps that you can refight this boss solo in the battle memories for that purest experience, but Alidoro's summon is what makes the fight memorable enough to be an end-of-area boss, even if it isn't really the most difficult. Well, unless you're this anonymous voter. In my opinion, the Two-Faced Overseer is the hardest boss in the game. In difficulty 5 on the boss rematch mode, that is. Since you can't get help from the tracker, and you'll probably get 2-shotted even on max stats, the Two-Faced Overseer is a fucking nightmare! Bro, I got one-shotted by Parade Master on difficulty 5. Every boss is the hardest boss in the game at level 5, no cap. At number 5, we have Veronique, leader of the Sweepers, who scored a total difficulty average of 5.76 out of 10. As for the quality ranking, she stays in 5th place there as well, with a score of 6.45, and for a regular NPC stalker fight, that is quite the impressive result. Veronique is not a terribly hard fight in the grand scheme of things, especially as stalker enemies don't tend to have the most varied movesets after you've fought them for a few attempts, but she has a few extra tricks up her sleeve to make her a tad more difficult than your average fight. Her giant boom hammer can release flames when she slams it against the floor, making the parry strategy a little dangerous, as staying near her at the end of her combo can see you getting singed. She's able to cross the arena with relative ease, with her attacks practically pulling herself around the room at the hammer's behest, and if you end up in front of her when the flamethrower comes out, you may as well accept your death there and then. That being said, I found running away from her combos to be my best strategy, because while she can move at fast speeds, her attacks don't have as much tracking as Lumacchio, for example. Avoid her spin to win, and you'll likely be positioned well for a counterattack. If you have the bow upgraded, or Legion arms that work at range, even better, she's a close quarters melee combatant, so having distance and ranged attacks is more than enough to give you an edge. If your parry game is on point, you can also break her weapon, which will nullify some of her most damaging moves and reduce her damage output severely. Not saying that's the easy way out, but the perfect parry grindstone combined with the P-Organ buffs to perfect parry weapon damage could get you there with enough practice. She's got 17 votes for easiest boss and 1 vote for hardest boss, which doesn't shock me, but only 2 votes for best boss and 7 votes for worst boss, which is a small shame. I feel like of those 2 metrics, she should skew more positive than negative, but when your competition for best boss is so fierce in this DLC, I understand. Her 6.45 in the quality ranking is enough to show she is quite beloved. And as for my voters, there's one comment that mentions Veronique and Lumacchio together, which I'll save for Lumacchio's entry, leaving us with a couple shorter comments for our hammer-wielding divalicious diva. Veronique is the best stalker fight in the game for me. Her massive hammer swings feel so satisfying to perfect block, and despite how unrelenting she can be at times, she never feels unfair. She's the perfect example of a sweeper, rugged and heavy hitting. If only she didn't have to die, she could have been a cool ally similar to Leia. Agreed, if she was able to keep control of the disease that was messing her mind up, I think she could have been extremely valuable to the cause. In fact, fighting alongside Veronique and her weapon would have been just as hype as fighting alongside Alidoro or Leia. She never once felt unfair despite her aggressive nature, and that's a really impressive feat to achieve. But the real props, as our next voter points out, go to her VA work. I believe no one's going to mention Veronique's voice acting, which is superb. I could literally feel the VA clutch her own teeth, could feel the struggle like if she were dealing with the Alchemist's cure IRL. She's not my favourite boss, that one goes to Arlecchino, but I still feel like talking about my favourite NPC fight in the entire game. Veronique was so well acted. Aliona Baranova is a real talent, and I can't wait to see her in more major roles in the future because she's totally ready for them. It does help that she is dating Jennifer English, who you know as Shadowheart from Baldur's Gate 3 or Mael from Expedition 33, which means Aliona's got one of the best role models in the industry to help her out. Get Aliona a bigger role in the sequel, I dare you, NeoWiz! At number 4, we have the Anguished Guardian of the Ruins, who scored a total difficulty average of 6.55 out of 10, while quality-wise he lands in 3rd place with a score of 7.84 out of 10. It is very rare for a large beast-like fight to be so beloved in a non-FromSoft Souls-like, but NeoWiz, you truly hit it out of the park with this one. The biggest pro for the Guardians fight is that the camera actually functions correctly, and the arena is absolutely massive, so we don't run into the same issues we got facing the Tyrannical Predator. You have ample space to move around, dodge and parry attacks, and avoid some of the larger AoEs in the second phase. The initial melee combos of the Guardian are all fairly straightforward to dodge. I liken them to the Archbishop's first phase in the base game's Cathedral, or to the various predictable melee combos of the Green Monster of the Swamps Phase 1. But what makes the Anguished Guardian a little tougher here is that his attacks are so large and vast that if you are positioned badly, you'll get clipped from behind and take damage anyway. Positioning is just key here, and alongside the tried and true formula of staying beneath the boss's body to wail at that face and booty, I don't think it'll take most players that long to adapt. Not to mention the boss's built-in weak spots with the horns growing out of his hand and head, which can be shattered for quick staggers, but the Guardian makes up for this with a high damage output that means any mistakes you do make are quite punishable, and I think that's a completely fair trade-off in a fight like this. Phase 2 adds a lot of extra surprises to the fight to make it a little harder. Giant Duke Steer Freya-style lasers, which you can avoid by rushing for the boss and sticking beneath him. A souped-up dagger that can now create holy light damage when it's dragged across the floor. And most importantly, a giant AoE that I still don't quite know the dodge timing for. The Anguished Guardian presents a really solid difficulty curve with his fight, but never veers into too difficult, and while I died quite a bit on this battle, I never got the sense it was overly tough. I'd probably rank it around a 7 on the difficulty scale myself, which was also the number with the most votes on our poll for this boss. He still received 7 votes for easiest fight and only 2 votes for hardest fight, but when you're competing against Arlecchino for that spot, is anyone shocked? Quality-wise, he got 5 votes for Best Boss and 1 vote for Worst Boss. It really comes as no surprise that Marchiona and Arlecchino low-key swept the Best Boss category. But hey, enough waffling from me, what do my voters think about Lies of P's biggest boss fight yet? Well, one anonymous voter dedicated their entire entry to the Guardian, so let's see what they have to say. Anguished Guardian of the Ruins feels big, powerful, and monstrous, and I love it. Out of all the puppets, humans, and beasts you fought throughout the game, this one feels so different, like an old, ancient, deformed creature that has awakened from a slumber. The moment you step into the big, open arena with a giant chained egg in the air, you just know you're about to fight something big. His appearance looks like an incomplete mess, like a great warrior was meant to be made, but failed. His fight feels like Fire Giant but done better. His weak points are immediately noticeable, and his attacks, though they originally might seem like they are intended to be dodged, can actually be parried and blocked quite well, especially his little cute arm. Though his health might seem to be way too big at first, once you break his horn and Carlo rams his fist into his face like a badass, all that fear is gone. Then there's the second phase. His second phase transition feels like Simon Manus's, and it seems to be the same god he reaches out to, showing a connection not many players would have seen. His powerful attacks now feel like he's gained some ancient power from a former civilization that was hinted at throughout the area previously. The laser is hard to counter for sure, but with the right timing, anyone can get it down. This to me is a large boss done right, mixing in excitement, difficulty, mystery, spectacle, and atmosphere all into one. Well, voter, you basically did my job for me, and you did it flawlessly. Pointing out how the boss can actually be parried as well as dodged, how Carlo's stagger attack can help turn the tides, and that makes a lot of sense given you're punching both his big face and his tiny little face on his face, which is quite a lot of face for one face. I like that you pointed out how the laser is actually a tad tricky to handle. I tried my usual strategies from regular Souls games and found myself clipped by it multiple times. So you definitely can't underestimate the laser, but you can learn it. And the comparison to Fire Giant makes a fair amount of sense, though for me I'd say it's more akin to a Dragonkin Soldier of Noxtella, or even a much less aggressive Phase 1 Ludwig. The Guardian is simply a big boss who has a fair, readable moveset and doesn't have any camera issues to speak of, which immediately makes it better than 90% of Souls-like bosses. Let's have another voter, shall we? Not sure what the general consensus of this boss is, but it pleasantly surprised me on how decent it was personally. Large boss fights in Souls games are sometimes annoying, such as Elden Beast, however for being such a giant boss, it was actually fairly manageable overall. Most of his moves are fair and telegraphed, not to mention dodging his flashy lasers or deflecting his trident feels really nice. Of course, this boss still suffers from problems many large bosses have, like having to deal with the camera and annoying AoEs, yet for being a large boss, this one was still fairly fun IMO, and it gets bonus points for the Midir Bale lasers and the Pale Knight. Pale Knight bonus points is so valid. For those confused, the Pale Knight is the boss weapon you receive from this creature's ergo, and it is a gunblade, there's enough said. I just think it's important to highlight when large boss fights are done well in these games, as between the Anguished Guardian here and some of the Night Lords in Elden Ring Night Rain, we're starting to see a bit of a large boss renaissance, and I'd love to see more quality big boss fights in the future. At number 3, we have Lumakio, Leader of the Bastards, who scored a total difficulty average of 7 out of 10. We love a round number in this household. Quality-wise, he lands in 6th with an average of 5.88 out of 10. If there's ever a boss that exemplifies the you'll either love him or hate him mentality, I think Lumakio is the definition. He's a very cool stalker fight who is the canonical wielder of the Etiquette umbrella, which starts him off in my good graces. He's voiced by Neil Newbon, which instantly makes him an icon, a legend, and truly the moment, and the story told through his fight is that of the most delectable hubris imaginable. An agent of the alchemists who bent to Simon's will out of sheer fear, his cowardly ways left him to clean up after their messes, killing their enemies until finally, he's forced to take out Carlo. This fight has 2 phases, with the first half being a traditional stalker battle where you have to deal with some precise and aggressive umbrella tricks, while the second half goes full Father Gascoigne phase 2 as Lumakio mutates into a carcass beast. Why? Because he decides to chug an alchemist cure midway through phase 1 to heal himself, not realizing that they wanted him to drink it so they could get rid of him as a loose end. So his own hubris in his position ultimately leads to him losing the humanity he was trying to protect, allowing his outer body to reflect the creature he was inside. And yet I feel bad for Lumakio. I think a lot of people watching this video would make the same choices he did if they were being threatened by a big bad like Simon, and that's what makes him so fascinating to me. His fight is, of course, controversial because he does a lot of damage and is hyper-aggressive throughout, while having multiple instances of his health bar healing between his phases. This naturally led to a lot of players getting frustrated or irritated, but I'll be the first to admit I never got that mad. I just wanted to get better at his fight. However, with no battle memories accompanying it, the only way to do so is to replay the DLC all over again. In my opinion, if you can consistently get him into his carcass form, you should be fine, as that's where his moveset gets a lot simpler, abandoning his technique-driven strikes for a more predictable series of claw slashes and swipes, though you will soon see via my voters that maybe my opinion is not that of the majority. If you have a decent weapon with a nice Fable art equipped, a la Puppet Ripper, you'll be more than fine, bring some fire as well. He got 4 votes for easiest boss and 13 votes for hardest boss, the only fight to reach double digits in the hardest category, aside from you-know-who. While quality-wise, he got 3 votes for best fight and 26 votes for worst fight, and I can see why people would hate him, but I think he's actually quite a fun skill check and not nearly as egregious as a tyrannical predator. Now, as for my voters, we have people on all sides of the Lumakio argument, so we'll look at both sides starting with the negative, and I apologize for anyone who wrote comments down on him that doesn't get featured. We have a lot of Lumakio comments. I had to be picky here. So let's start with this voter from Oregon, who found Lumakio so hard he couldn't beat the DLC. Lumakio's second phase is the worst phase in the game. His moveset is too erratic, combined with the seemingly instant decay inflicted on all of his attacks, and the first phase encourages you to parry a lot, which wears down your weapon's durability. The decay might be my least favorite in this fight, whereas in the Green Monster it was somewhat manageable. This was just constant and made it impossible to beat. I had less trouble with Melania's second phase and Malakath as a whole than I did with this fight. This phase was so impossibly hard that it ruined an already great DLC for me, and I gave up on the DLC because of it. Before the fight, I'd give the DLC a 10 out of 10, now it's a 4 out of 10, just because of how much the second phase hurt to fight with. And it sucks that I have to write this, because I love this game, I love Lies of P and I love Neil Newbin, but the fight was just, dare I say, unfair. When I read this comment, I knew I had to feature it when talking about Lumakio's negative qualities, as what's a more negative review than someone admitting they didn't finish the DLC because he was too difficult? His erratic moveset certainly takes a lot of time to learn, but the challenge with Phase 2 is more so that you don't get there on every attempt, so having the opportunity to learn those parry or dodge timings is lesser than Phase 1. As for the weapon decay, I think Lies of P's DLC benefits from the player having 2 weapons you could potentially fight with at the ready, as if you have the Carrier's Amulet from the base game to give you more capacity, or you just upgraded capacity normally through your adventures, this should be less of an issue. The DLC also does give us a new item that allows you to fully repair a weapon mid-fight as a consumable. There are answers to these issues if you're willing to try them, but then I also think you're fully valid in wanting to stop the experience when you stop having fun. My genuine advice would just be to come back to it after you've taken a month or 2 off. You might surprise yourself. Or you could lower the difficulty for this one fight so you can pass it. That way you can experience the rest of the DLC, including its fantastic endgame. I know not every player though can handle this due to the concept of pride in the community, but I think everyone should use every tool at their disposal myself. Next up, a comment that originally was going to be included in the Veronique entry, but since it mentioned Lumakio as well, I held it for here. I'd like to give a shout out to the stalker fights of the DLC, Veronique and Lumakio. I think these fights are very underrated, at least according to opinions I've read elsewhere. Unlike the stalker fights of the main campaign, which mostly just take P's moveset and maybe add something unique here and there like White Ladies twirling, Veronique and Lumakio have very unique movesets compared to P's weapon repertoire. Veronique with these massive berserker-like swings, occasionally covering ground with fire to keep P on the back foot, and Lumakio using smoke bombs to hide his fury attacks along with throwing bombs to keep P away from his frail, rich, bastard body, further cheating by healing himself midway through the fight. It was very refreshing, and felt like real challenges to overcome. Veronique probably killed me the most out of all the bosses in this DLC, not counting the final boss, and that's not even mentioning Lumakio's karmic transformation halfway through his fight, being betrayed by the alchemists like how he betrayed so many in their name before. Admittedly, I think this is the weak point for his encounter, not a fan of the decay spam or the rather unpredictable moveset, but overall I loved his fight. This comment is more neutral with Lumakio because there's a lot of praise for both the plot and Phase 1, but just not a lot for Phase 2. The way Lumakio uses the smoke bombs is a great way of showcasing his personality through his fighting style as this sneaky assassin who uses underhanded tactics to come out on top. Very great Shinobi Owl from Sekiro energy, which was something I pointed out immediately upon beginning the fight. They also rightfully mention that the reason for the DLC stalker fights feeling tougher is because they do have their own dedicated movesets. They're not just using a stock set of 3 or 4 attacks that Carlo would use had he been holding their weapons himself. A lot of Lumakio's attacks can't be performed by us with the umbrella after all, and that's what I wanted to see, some originality. Lastly, a positive Lumakio comment. I think Lumakio is the best Stalker enemy in the entire game, and his boss fight is close to being perfect. His first and second, if you count the elixir drinking as a second phase, are incredible. His moveset is so fast and relentless, and mastering it is so satisfying. His dialogue too, both pre and mid-fight, is so perfect, and fits the slimy bastard, pun intended, that he perfectly is. Where this fight loses me is after he transforms. He inflicts decay buildup incredibly fast, and combined with his extreme aggression and damage, you're left with two choices. Do I heal myself now and let my weapon break and just die a second later because he's already attacking me again and I have no time to cure the decay, or heal the decay and die immediately because I have no health and Lumakio has started another long and extensive combo? As someone who never uses the resistance ampoules, this fight feels almost impossible without them, excluding, of course, the people who are able to perfect parry all his extremely erratic combos. Overall, I think Lumakio is a brilliant boss fight and a brilliant character, and while his transformation is very fitting fate for him, I do wish the decay build-up would be a little lower and wouldn't demand a resistance ampoule to get through every time you reach his final phase. So all three of my voter comments today have a through line, which is that the difficulty of the fight comes from the second phase. But this comment I found interesting because the player mentioned they didn't want to use the resistance ampoules to give them better decay resistance, which is completely fine, your prerogative, but I kind of have to be that guy. When the game gives you the tools to make your life a little easier, if you choose not to use them, I wouldn't say that's the game's fault. That's on you for choosing to make your life a little harder, similar to how in the Tyrannical Predator entry earlier, someone based their difficulty on a New Game Plus run. That difficulty was there because you made it difficult. Also worth noting that in my playthrough I was able to beat Lumakio without using resistance ampoules, but my perfect parry game was horrendous. So it is entirely possible to beat him without parrying and without ampoules. However, I do agree that the decay buildup needs to be lessened in this fight. This is the one through line I think we all agree with. It's almost comical how one small cut practically fills the decay bar. I think maybe 3 or 4 hits should be enough to inflict you, giving a tiny bit of leeway to the player, but for how valid Lumakio's difficulty is, this fight shows a stark difference between players who are willing to use everything at their disposal to come out on top, versus players who simply can't use items or lower the difficulty lest they feel like their runs of the game are tainted. Play how you play, but I just found this very interesting to research, and I personally think it's very liberating to just puppet Ripper this guy to death with my triangle fable art. At number 2, we have Markiona, Puppeteer of Death, who scored a total difficulty average of 7.02 out of 10. While quality-wise she stays at number 2, but with a higher average of 8.88 out of 10. What this tells me is that Markiona may be a fan-favourite boss fight, but the difficulty isn't too off the charts here, which is reflected by my voters who gave her 2 votes for easiest boss and 1 vote for hardest boss, while receiving 29 votes for best boss and 3 votes for worst boss. She is beloved, but given she's the first major hurdle of the DLC, they didn't make her so hard that she'd stop people from progressing. Oh, but by god, her boss fight is so damn cool. Markiona is a gank fight where she battles alongside a puppet she controls via her strings. This is the same format as the nameless puppet from the base game, except Markiona can actually throw down, unlike Geppetto, who has to stay out at the arena. The objective here is to defeat Markiona, and her health bar is the one that matters. Deplete it and the fight will immediately end, as once she dies, her puppet becomes a lifeless piece of scrap. But that's easier said than done. Her puppet takes more damage than she does per attack, which incentivizes you to actually knock out her helper first. This causes Markiona to re-heal the puppet, leaving her vulnerable for a short while if you can manage her various ergo orb attacks. The challenge of the fight, though, comes from managing both Markiona and her puppet, ensuring that you always know who you need to be blocking at any given moment. If the string connecting the pair is blue, focus on Markiona. If the string connecting the pair is red, focus the puppet. Learning to shift your lock-on between the pair is key to succeeding, and was something I struggled with immensely, but ironically this puppeteering style of fight is perfect for a ganking counter, as you never have to worry about both fighters attacking you at the same time, with the exception of Marchiona's ultimate gold attack after re-healing her puppet mid-fight. You always have one aggressor and one defender, so you can technically focus on one of her or her puppet at any given moment. This takes away some of the guesswork and frustration of managing two enemies because you're only truly managing one, Marchiona. The puppet is just an extension of her will, a weapon she wields. Is this even a true gank fight? We can debate the semantics down below. The reality is that Marchiona is actually quite squishy, and on my winning run, I was able to focus her down and kill her before she could even revive her puppet the first time. It was immensely satisfying to pull off, yet I wanted to go back and fight her again right after. She was that fun, with such a unique moveset for the genre. Between Marchiona and the first Black Rabbit Brotherhood fight, I truly think NeoWiz understands how to make proper ganks, and I think they're the first developer where I'm not really afraid to see how they'll mix it up in the future. As for my voters, I'm sure a lot of praise is about to come to our blue Smurfette's way, and with over 50 voter comments talking about her, I can only pick 2, I'm sorry. Doing a duo fight in a Souls game is always a gamble, not even FromSoft always gets them right. There was a semblance of a duo fight in the base game with the eldest of the Black Rabbit Brotherhood, but that was played in the safest way. The member who joined the fight was aggressive, while the eldest remained at a distance, only attacking when you got too close and sometimes charging at you. Ever since that fight though, I wondered what would happen if they made a full-on duo boss, and they delivered. Marchiona's puppet, who is always connected to her, is the physical attacker, while Marchiona is the mage. I love this dynamic because it's immediately clear that you can expect from both parts of the duo boss. If you deplete the puppet's health bar, Marchiona will revive it, and she will absolutely spam attack to keep you away from her. I found leaving the puppet alive easier. The color of the string shows who is actively attacking you, red if the puppet attacks, blue if Marchiona attacks, and golden for a super move involving both bosses. This is a great mechanic to have because it immediately tells you where the danger is coming from. The puppet sometimes is out of your line of sight, but you can use the strings to find it easily. I do have a few complaints here though. The camera when you lock onto the puppet, I have motion sickness, and let's just say some of the movements the puppet does swings the camera around wildly, and my motion sickness doesn't agree with that. The other complaint is when the puppet is behind you. Even if the wire glows red and you know the puppet will attack you, you don't know what the attack is going to be. Sometimes you just have to spam dodge in the hope to avoid whatever it is the puppet decides to do. But those are minor complaints in one of the best boss fights this game has. I definitely agree that the camera can be a bit roller coastery at times here. It's the one part of the fight I feel I could do better on a rematch, as I found switching between the pair to be a bit hectic with how the puppet moves. At least Marchiona herself tends to stay pretty chill movement-wise, and I also agree that when the string is connected red but the puppet is out of view, the panic does set in as you realize you don't know what's coming and you've just got to take the L and heal through the pain. But everything else about Marchiona's fight is so well designed that those minor hiccups do just feel that minor. The tether's color acting as a visual indicator for who you should be paying attention to is just a genius detail, and the way you can tackle this boss from multiple angles by choosing whether to down the puppet or focus Marchiona from the get-go is really refreshing. And the praise for our diva doesn't end there. Marchiona is one of the best designed duo bosses I can think of. Plenty of duo bosses suffer due to overlapping attacks, sloppy camera work, and arena design that does not compensate for battling multiple opponents. Marchiona avoids these problems by having her puppet be constantly tethered to her by a thread. Not only does this work thematically with a game all about puppets, but it works mechanically by allowing you to tell when an attack is coming even when one of the pair is off screen. All of her attacks are readable and reactable once you get used to them, and there are plenty of opportunities for you to get damage in or show off your skill. For instance, you roll into Marchiona's spinning blue ball attack to get some free hits in, or if you perfect parry the golden slam attack from the puppet, it will always stun both of them, letting you get some easy hits. I didn't know that. This fight is creative, well crafted, and allows for skill expression in a way that is rare for any boss fight in the genre, let alone a duo fight. What puts this fight over the edge for me as my favourite is how easily this could have fallen apart. Duo bosses are famously difficult to properly tune and can lead to an imbalanced mess of a fight. Marchiona manages to ride that line beautifully, delivering an expertly crafted fight that is quite challenging but incredibly rewarding to master. See, I'm learning things I didn't even know about this voter. I had no idea about that perfect parrying her golden slam would create a window of opportunity for extra damage. I want to refight this boss right now, and you know what? I bet you do as well, viewer. All the other positives hit the same points our previous commenter and I myself brought up, and spoilers, every other comment I got on Marchiona said the same things. We're all simply in agreement that she is an exceptionally well-designed gank fight, and dare I say, one of the best in the genre. The only thing about Marchiona that could have made her better was if she had a little more health. It's not meant to be an uber difficult fight, but I still felt like it was over at a quicker pace than I would have liked, but I guess that is what the battle memories are for. At number 1, we have Arlecchino, the Blood Artist, who scored a total difficulty average of 9.54 out of 10, while quality-wise he stays in first place with an average of 9.57 out of 10, aka Arlecchino is considered an absolute GOAT, not only when it comes to Lies of P, but for a majority of my community rankings. 77 votes for best boss in the game and only 2 votes for worst boss, while he's got 0 votes for easiest boss and 99 votes for hardest boss. The fact that nobody trolled the form by calling him the easiest is perhaps the biggest indicator that one does not fuck with Arlecchino. And having now faced him multiple times via the battle memories on stream, I can safely say that Arlecchino is up there as the toughest boss in the game. The duality of my experiences with him are hilarious. My first attempt with Leia, I was able to beat him on my first go, just barely scraping by with a slither of health following his blood tornado attacks in Phase 2, while my solo attempts saw me getting my ass handed to me at the start of Phase 1, where Arlecchino's combo game is off the charts. He's got mix-ups, he's got long combo strings, he's got an attack he only breaks out when you try to heal, attempting to cut you off with an entirely new combo. He can grapple towards you, and your only saving grace is that this game doesn't have the bleed status effect. Because good god, if he was a boss in Elden Ring, you'd be blocking breed. Blocking breed! Wait, no, do that one again. If he was a boss in Elden Ring, you'd be proccing bleed every 2 seconds. Phase 2, his attacks have so much more flair as he uses his bloody ergo to enhance all his strikes. I'd often instinctively dodge certain attacks only to get hit by the afterblast, or I'd fail a parry and be at the mercy of one of his vast combos, or dare I say, I dodge backwards only to get staggered by his dual buzzsaw lunge. And let's not even get started on his grabs, which are some of the most brutal in any Souls-like game I've ever seen. But conversely, getting to stagger and break him is also some of the most satisfying gameplay in Lies of P. Fighting him with Leia is a special event, while fighting him solo is an expression of skill. All while the ticking clock of his theme constantly hums in the background, a reminder that you and Leia only have so much time left to save Romeo before she succumbs to illness and Arlecchino wins the day. All this while in both phases he has the best drip I've ever seen. I mean, come on now, Arlecchino is serving fashion and would eat a reveal runway. He's the most mechanically complex boss that NeoWiz have designed, and it's giving the same energy we got from Orphan of Kos back when Bloodborne's DLC first released. What's impressive here though is that he's managed to find the balance between being so hard it's fun, and too hard that it's not fun. After the promised Consort Radahn debacle last year, I'm glad to see that the community still has a sense of nuance when talking about these bosses, and Arlecchino truly deserves all of the merits he's received. So let's get some voters in here, shall we? Arlecchino is Kino. I know it's an overused joke, but who cares, it's true. Arlecchino was already my favourite character in the base game, but the DLC just cemented his place there. It's so amazing to not only see him when he was still a murderous serial killer, but to see his psychosis on full display. I always fought him with Leia, even though I'm a diehard no summons guy, because of how absolutely epic the fight is with her. Both VAs do a great job as well, delivering some of the best performances in Souls-like history, especially Leia's VA, who manages to fill every line during that fight with sadness and rage, as if she really was her character. Absolute cinema. Plus, the fight itself is fun, whether or not you're fighting with her. Arlecchino's first phase is much easier than the second, but his combo mix-up game is brilliant, where I'd see a new combo every time I fought him. And phase 2 is just absolute chaos. I still haven't beaten him without Leia's help. Though that combo at the beginning of phase 2, let's be real guys, it's not nearly as hard to deal with as people are saying, so stop comparing it to Waterfowl Dance, people. It's not that hard. Overall, this might be my favourite Souls-like boss of all time. 10 out of 10, GG, Arlecchino sweeps. Yeah, I'm very much in full agreement here with everything said. Phase 2 is definitely the harder phase, with Arlecchino's attacks doing a lot more damage there, but his phase 1 cannot be underestimated. It is a brutal gauntlet of learning one of his 50 billion combos, only for him to randomly use a move you're not expecting at the start of the fight and making you think, well, fuck my drag, right? But it truly is the cinema of it all that makes Arlecchino so special for me. Liza P. Overture managed to blend a hard-as-nails boss fight alongside a genuinely heart-wrenching story that had you caring about Leia and Romeo while wanting to beat the fuck out of Arlecchino. It makes those moments where you tag team him with Leia so satisfying to pull off, and solo it makes eventually beating him feel all the more impressive. It also helped that I used Leia's weapon to, as I coined the term, Leia his ass in phase 2 of my solo runs. If he didn't want me to spam my awesome Fable Art of Vows, he should have simply played better, that's all I'll say. Arlecchino is, in my eyes, the only instance of a Souls-like boss legitimately matching the quality of FromSoft when FromSoft's boss creation team is locked the fuck in. I'm talking Gale, Ishin, Messmer, whatever galaxy brain shit FromSoft is on when making those types of bosses was somehow obtained by NeoWiz with this motherfucker. Other games like Neo 2 will match/exceed those bosses mechanically, but fall short in other areas. Every single thing is flawless here. The narrative, the voice acting, the character design, the music, the cutscenes, the difficulty and complexity of the moveset. I beat this idiot with a level 120 New Game 0 build at difficulty 5, not because I wanted to brag, but because this guy's combos are so compelling to master that I didn't care if they one-shotted me. And on top of all of that, you get a different version of the fight that's basically a better version of Egon and Bale. NeoWiz genuinely ascended here. I'm fully on board with this. Arlecchino is on a different level to anything this company has worked on, that I can't help but hold them to a higher level of esteem now. They have officially proven that they can play with the big boys, and whatever comes next for their company, they have officially raised the bar. Arlecchino is exactly what you said, compelling, from start to finish. I don't often immediately want to refight bosses I beat in these games, because I tend to be very one and done in my mindset. I immediately jumped into Arlecchino in the battle memories because I wanted to get better at him. I wanted to learn that moveset and ultimately come out on top without Leia, just so I could show that whether it was Leia or Carlo, we both had the capability to take him down. And maybe also because if you get a question wrong in the base game, he tries to blow you up once, and I am a petty bitch. And you know Carlo is petty too, because that finishing cutscene, he specifically cuts off Arlecchino's hands in the same way the Blood Artist did to Romeo. Cinema, my dear viewers. Alongside being the hardest boss in this DLC, and likely the entire game. Voted for by you. And that's my list. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Do you agree with my community? Let me know down below, and be sure to parry that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all my future videos. Next up is going to be the community ranking for Elden Ring Night Reigns Night Lord bosses, so keep an eye out for that. Be sure to follow my YouTube community tab if you want to make sure you're involved with future polls, or you can go to my social medias such as my Blue Sky, my Twitch channel, or my Discord, where updates will be posted frequently. Thank you to my YouTube channel members for supporting me for another month. It's $4.99, you get access to certain videos, you get a shout out down below, and here at the end of the video as well. So thank you so much, you guys are amazing. And I'll see you all next time for another video. Adios.